Uh, what is your name?
Sergeant Samuel Hayes, Marine Corps, a long time ago.
Samuel Hayes? Medal of Honor, Vietnam?
Yes, ma'am, but that was a
Homeless veteran on trial until judge heard his name and stood up in silence. When homeless veteran Samuel Hayes appeared before Judge Whitaker for stealing food, he expected another humiliation until the judge heard his name, stood up in stunned silence, and whispered, "Medal of Honor, recipient." Day 1, 9:47 a.m., Fairhaven. Municipal court buzzed with Monday morning docket calls while Samuel Hayes, 67, sat in orange jumpsuit among petty criminals and traffic violators. 3 months homeless since Caroline's death, the former Marine had become invisible in his Ohio hometown, another casualty of grief that military service hadn't prepared him to fight alone. His arrest for stealing bread seemed fitting. Heroes reduced to thieves by circumstances beyond their control. Samuel Hayes had earned Medal of Honor in Vietnam for single-handedly destroying enemy machine gun nest while saving 37 Marines during Tet Offensive. 57 years later, nobody remembered Sergeant Hayes who charged through enemy fire carrying wounded brothers to safety. Caroline's cancer had consumed their savings before consuming her life. Medical bills exceeded military pension, while grief made employment impossible for widower whose PTSD had been manageable with loving wife support. 3 months on streets had reduced war hero to collecting cans for survival, while avoiding eye contact with civilians whose comfortable lives his sacrifice had protected without their knowledge or gratitude. Judge Patricia Whitaker, 52, had presided over municipal court for 15 years while never expecting to encounter living legend whose Congressional Medal of Honor citation she'd studied during law school military history course. Her father had served under Hayes and Vietnam Staff Sergeant Robert Whitaker, whose survival had depended on Sergeant Hayes's courage during battle that few veterans discussed publicly, despite Medal of Honor recognition. Court Officer Jake "Steel" Morrison watched homeless veteran with recognition that military bearing couldn't disguise despite circumstances that civilian society had failed to prevent through adequate veteran support systems. Some heroes fall through cracks that gratitude should have sealed, and courtrooms become final battlefields where dignity confronts desperation while justice decides whether service matters more than circumstances. Samuel faced theft charges carrying possible jail time, while his military service remained unknown to court system that processed homeless defendants without recognizing heroes whose circumstances had overcome honor through grief and institutional failures. Viral setup. Steele's Iron Brotherhood was monitoring court proceedings for veteran advocacy, a routine that would explode into national story within 2 hours. 9:52 a.m., 5 minutes to recognition. State versus Samuel Hayes, theft in the 5th degree. Bailiff announced while Samuel shuffled forward in shackles that reduced Medal of Honor recipient to common criminal requiring judicial mercy. Mr. Hayes, you're charged with stealing food items valued at $11.47 from Murphy's Market. How do you plead? Samuel's voice barely whispered. Guilty, Your Honor. I was hungry. The admission struck Judge Whitaker like artillery shell war hero reduced to stealing food for survival, while civilian society had failed veteran whose service had protected their freedom through personal sacrifice. Sir, do you have counsel? Can't afford lawyer, ma'am. Just want to accept responsibility and move on. Samuel's dignity, despite circumstances, revealed character that military training had embedded permanently through service that civilian comfort had forgotten during grateful nations' selective memory. Public defender approached while court system processed homeless veteran through standard procedures that didn't account for heroes whose circumstances required understanding rather than punishment. Mr. Hayes, I'm attorney Sarah Martinez, appointed to represent you. May I ask about your military service? The question sparked first genuine emotion. Samuel had shown pride fighting through grief and shame that homelessness had created through social isolation from community that had once honored his heroism. Shareable moment. Court stenographer starts live tweeting proceedings. Homeless hero story would be online in 3 minutes, 9:55 a.m. 2 minutes to viral moment. I served in Vietnam, ma'am, Marines. Did my duty like everyone else. Samuel's modesty concealed Medal of Honor heroism, while his reluctance to claim recognition revealed character that had earned America's highest decoration through actions rather than words. Martinez pressed gently, "What unit, Mr. Hayes?" "My father served in Vietnam." 1st Battalion, 3rd Marines, Sergeant Samuel Hayes. Judge Whitaker's pen froze mid-signature as recognition flooded memory. Samuel Hayes, Medal of Honor, recipient whose citation she'd memorized during father's bedtime stories about Marine who'd saved his life. "Bailiff, please approach the bench," Whitaker whispered while processing revelation that Medal of Honor recipient was facing theft charges for stealing food that hunger had made necessary. Steele Morrison leaned forward from gallery while understanding that court proceeding had just transformed from routine theft case into national embarrassment, requiring immediate Iron Brotherhood intervention. "That's Sergeant Hayes, Medal of Honor, recipient from Vietnam," Steele whispered to courtroom sketch artist whose documentation would become historical record of hero's lowest moment. Martinez continued questioning while unaware that legal proceeding had attracted attention from veteran advocacy networks that Steele's emergency text had activated throughout Ohio. "Sir, did you receive any commendations for your service?" Samuel's hesitation revealed lifetime of modesty, while Medal of Honor represented valor that comfortable civilians couldn't comprehend through peacetime experience lacking combat's testing of character. 9:57 a.m. Moment of truth. "I received some recognition, ma'am. Nothing special." Judge Whitaker stood slowly while courtroom fell silent as unprecedented judicial behavior commanded attention from everyone present during routine proceedings that had become extraordinary. Sergeant Samuel Hayes, Medal of Honor recipient, Vietnam War, for conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity at risk of life above and beyond call of duty. The formal citation reading transformed courtroom atmosphere as recognition dawned that homeless defendant was genuine American hero, whose circumstances required explanation rather than prosecution. Samuel straightened slightly, while military bearing emerged from beneath civilian desperation that grief and homelessness had created through systematic failures affecting vulnerable veterans. "Yes, ma'am, that was long time ago." "Sergeant Hayes, would you please remain standing while this court shows appropriate respect for your service and sacrifice?" Judge Whitaker's command created historical moment as entire courtroom rose in tribute to Medal of Honor recipient whose homelessness had shamed civilian society that had forgotten greatest heroes. Steele's live stream to Iron Brotherhood networks exploded across social media, while "Ja Hero, Homeless" began trending within minutes of judicial recognition that had transformed theft proceeding into national wake-up call. Ladies and gentlemen, you are in presence of genuine American hero whose service protected your freedom, Whitaker announced, while courtroom silence honored sacrifice that comfortable society had allowed to fall through cracks. Cliffhanger. Steele's emergency call to Iron Brotherhood chapters activated veteran response that would arrive in 15 minutes with national media. 10:02 a.m. Courtroom transformation. Judge Whitaker dismissed all charges while citing judicial discretion in case involving Medal of Honor recipient whose circumstances required community response rather than criminal prosecution that would shame grateful nation. Mr. Hayes, this court finds that hunger-driven desperation doesn't constitute criminal intent when affecting veteran whose service has earned perpetual gratitude rather than prosecution. Samuel's confusion was evident. Ma'am, I still stole food. Law's the law. Sergeant, law serves justice, and justice demands accountability from society that allowed Medal of Honor recipient to become homeless rather than supported. Case dismissed with apologies from this court. Steele's Iron Brotherhood members began arriving as word spread through veteran networks that Medal of Honor recipient had been homeless and facing criminal charges for stealing food. Martinez coordinated with Veterans Legal Defense Network while understanding that Samuel's case represented systematic failure requiring comprehensive intervention rather than individual charity that couldn't address underlying problems. Sergeant Hayes, you're entitled to full VA benefits, including housing assistance that bureaucratic delays have apparently prevented, Martinez explained while reviewing documentation that had been neglected. Courtroom gallery filled with veterans whose attendance transformed legal proceeding into impromptu tribute recognizing hero whose circumstances had revealed institutional failures affecting vulnerable military families. 10:15 a.m. Social media explosion. A Medal of Honor, homeless, exploded across platforms as Steele's live stream reached 500,000 viewers, witnessing judicial recognition of war hero whose homelessness had shamed civilian society into immediate action. Medal of Honor recipient was homeless and facing charges for stealing bread. Twitter posts generated instant outrage while visual evidence contradicted any excuse for allowing hero to suffer without community support. Judge Whitaker's unprecedented standing tribute became viral moment as courthouse video showed proper respect for military sacrifice that civilian comfort had forgotten during selective gratitude. Veterans Administration received thousands of calls demanding explanation for how Medal of Honor recipient had fallen through system designed to honor rather than abandon greatest heroes requiring ongoing support. Steele coordinated with Iron Brotherhood chapters while motorcycle communities' response demonstrated civilian dedication to protecting vulnerable veterans that official programs had failed to serve adequately. Samuel Hayes saved 37 Marines, including my father during Tet Offensive, posted Gold Star family member whose testimony reached 2.3 million shares within hours. CNN arrived as national media recognized story significance, while Medal of Honor recipients' homelessness represented institutional failure requiring immediate accountability and systematic reform. This is Samuel Hayes, Medal of Honor recipient, who charged enemy machine gun position alone to save surrounded Marines. He should be living in mansion, not stealing bread, Steele announced during interview. 10:45 a.m. Federal response. Veterans Administration Secretary called Judge Whitaker personally while demanding immediate resolution of bureaucratic failures that had allowed Medal of Honor recipient to become homeless. Your Honor, Samuel Hayes represents our greatest failure. Every resource will be mobilized immediately, Secretary promised, while understanding that national embarrassment required comprehensive response. White House Press Secretary announced presidential intervention. President is personally reviewing case of Sergeant Samuel Hayes while ensuring no Medal of Honor recipient faces homelessness again. Samuel sat stunned while processing transformation from criminal defendant to national cause célèbre, whose circumstances had inspired federal response that individual cases rarely received. "I just wanted something to eat," Samuel whispered, while complexity of sudden attention overwhelmed grief-compromised mental state that PTSD had affected since Caroline's death. Steele provided protective support, while Iron Brotherhood formed security detail, ensuring Samuel's safety during media attention that vulnerable veteran hadn't sought through criminal prosecution. Martinez coordinated legal response while understanding that Samuel's case had revealed systematic problems requiring policy changes rather than individual assistance that wouldn't address underlying failures. Federal investigators arrived to review VA processes that had failed Medal of Honor recipient, while congressional hearings were scheduled to address institutional problems that hero's homelessness had exposed. Day 2, Tuesday morning, Samuel woke in VA hospital, while overnight medical evaluation had confirmed malnutrition and exposure effects that 3 months of homelessness had created through institutional neglect of decorated veteran. Steele maintained bedside vigil, while Iron Brotherhood provided security from media attention that Samuel's mental state couldn't handle during grief process that Caroline's death had created. "How did this happen?" Samuel asked while processing overnight transformation from invisible homeless person to national symbol requiring federal intervention and media attention. "System failed you, brother, but you're not alone anymore," Steele assured, while veteran advocacy had activated comprehensive support that individual case had inspired through public outrage. VA Secretary arrived personally to apologize while announcing Samuel Hayes Protocol, requiring immediate review of all Medal of Honor recipient benefits, ensuring no hero faced similar circumstances. "Sergeant Hayes, this nation owes you more than apology. We owe you lifetime of gratitude expressed through actions rather than words," Secretary declared, while cameras documented federal accountability. Tuesday, 5 p.m. National Reckoning. 60 Minutes called. CNN called. Every major network wanted interviews with Medal of Honor recipient whose homelessness had revealed systematic failures affecting vulnerable veterans nationwide. But call that mattered came from Caroline's niece. "Uncle Samuel, I've been looking for you since Aunt Caroline died. You have family who loves you." Emotional moment number 1. Samuel's reunion with family he'd lost touch with during grief tissues required nationwide. Day 3, Wednesday morning, VA investigation revealed systematic failures affecting 847 Medal of Honor recipients, while Samuel's case had exposed bureaucratic neglect that had created homelessness among America's greatest heroes, requiring immediate intervention. Multiple Medal of Honor recipients have faced housing insecurity due to administrative delays and inadequate support systems, investigative report revealed, while congressional hearings demanded accountability. Samuel's medical evaluation confirmed severe PTSD exacerbated by Caroline's death, while grief counseling that VA should have provided immediately had been delayed through bureaucratic processes. Mr. Hayes required immediate intervention after spouse's death, but support systems failed completely. Psychiatrists testified while explaining how institutional neglect had created veteran homelessness. Steele coordinated with Iron Brotherhood while understanding that Samuel's case represented thousands of vulnerable veterans whose circumstances required systematic reform rather than individual attention that media coverage provided temporarily. But crisis developed when fraud investigators questioned Samuel's Medal of Honor authenticity after internet trolls claimed homeless veteran was exploiting military honors for sympathy and financial benefit. Fake hero, using stolen valor for handouts, anonymous posts claimed, while coordinated harassment campaign targeted Samuel's credibility through social media attacks that veteran-hating trolls promoted. Jake's Iron Brotherhood response was immediate. Anyone questioning Samuel Hayes' heroism questions documented history and 37 Marines whose lives he saved. Defense Department released complete service record, while Medal of Honor Society provided testimony confirming Samuel's Tet Offensive heroism that internet trolls had questioned through ignorant harassment. Wednesday, 6 p.m., Vindication, Pentagon held unprecedented press conference while Medal of Honor citation was read publicly to counter fraud allegations that internet harassment had promoted despite documented military heroism. Sergeant Samuel Hayes' Medal of Honor was earned through conspicuous gallantry during Tet Offensive when he single-handedly destroyed enemy position while saving 37 Marines, Defense Secretary announced. Video footage from Vietnam showed Samuel's actual rescue missions, while military documentation contradicted fraud allegations that civilian ignorance had promoted through social media harassment. Every allegation against Samuel Hayes has been disproven through military records, Pentagon spokesperson declared, while federal support eliminated doubt about heroism that trolls had questioned. Steele's testimony provided eyewitness account from veteran who'd survived because of Samuel's courage. This man saved my life and 36 others. Questioning his heroism insults everyone he rescued. Caroline's niece, Rebecca, testified about family separation that grief had created. Uncle Samuel disappeared after Aunt Carolyn died. He couldn't handle losing his soulmate after 45 years of marriage. Samuel's first public statement addressed critics. I didn't serve for recognition, served for brothers whose families deserved their safe return. Never wanted attention, just needed food. The humility went viral, while hero humility demonstrated character that Medal of Honor heroism had represented through service rather than self-promotion that military values had emphasized. Emotional moment there are too. Samuel visiting Caroline's grave with full military honor, guard heartbreaking tribute to love and loss. Thursday, day 4. Samuel's first interview with 60 Minutes drew 47 million viewers, while Medal of Honor recipients' homelessness had inspired national conversation about veteran care requiring systematic reform rather than temporary sympathy. Caroline was my anchor. Lost her, lost my way, Samuel explained, while grief counseling had enabled him to discuss trauma that PTSD and spousal death had created. Judge Whitaker received national recognition for courtroom tribute, while her father's Vietnam service had prepared her to recognize hero, whose circumstances demanded judicial compassion. Samuel Hayes saved my father's life in Vietnam, Honoring him in court was personal duty as well as judicial responsibility, Whitaker testified during congressional hearing. VA announced comprehensive reforms while Samuel Hayes' protocol required immediate review of all Medal of Honor recipients, ensuring adequate support for America's greatest heroes. Steele's Iron Brotherhood received federal recognition as Veteran Advocacy Organization, while their response had demonstrated community support for vulnerable military families. Friday, Day 5. Samuel moved into transitional housing while VA benefits were fully restored through expedited processing that bureaucratic delays had prevented despite legal entitlement. Rebecca provided family support, while Reunion had addressed isolation that grief had created through loss of primary relationship that 45 years of marriage had established. Iron Brotherhood established permanent Samuel Hayes Advocacy Center, while his case had inspired sustained veteran support rather than temporary media attention that usually faded quickly. 1 month later, Samuel testified before Congress about veteran homelessness, while Medal of Honor recipients' experience had inspired Heroes Housing Act, requiring immediate shelter for decorated veterans facing housing insecurity. Steele sat in witness gallery, while Iron Brotherhood had become official congressional witnesses on veteran issues requiring community advocacy that official programs couldn't provide adequately. No Medal of Honor recipient should face homelessness in country they've served with distinction, Samuel testified, while his experience had revealed systematic failures requiring federal intervention. Judge Whitaker received Presidential Medal of Freedom for judicial courage, while her courtroom recognition had inspired proper respect for military sacrifice that civilian society had forgotten. Rebecca managed Samuel's affairs, while Family Reunion had provided emotional support that grief counseling alone couldn't address through human connection requiring love rather than professional treatment. Caroline's grave received military headstone, while VA had corrected administrative oversight that had delayed proper recognition of military spouse whose support had enabled veteran service. 6 months later, National Medal of Honor Convention invited Samuel as keynote speaker, while his transformation from homeless veteran to policy advocate had influenced systematic change protecting military heroes nationwide. Homelessness revealed how grief can overwhelm even Medal of Honor recipients when support systems fail. Samuel addressed 3,000-plus attendees whose service deserved protection from institutional neglect. Steele's Iron Brotherhood had established hero advocacy chapters in 30 states, while their support created sustainable programs serving vulnerable veterans that official systems couldn't adequately protect. Caroline's memory inspired Samuel Hayes Veteran Support Foundation, while his experience had demonstrated that even greatest heroes required community assistance during personal crises. Academic research studied Samuel's case while documenting how individual stories could inspire systematic reform when community organizing met institutional willingness to address failures requiring comprehensive intervention. Military family sacrifice for freedom that includes right to housing security when veterans face personal crises, Samuel testified before United Nations. Opposition from budget committees claimed veteran housing requirements created fiscal burdens, while some lawmakers resisted funding that hero protection demanded through federal responsibility. Additional veteran benefits strained budgets already supporting multiple social programs. Fiscal conservative argued while ignoring moral obligation to support Medal of Honor recipients. Samuel's advocacy overcame resistance through documented results showing reduced homelessness and improved outcomes at facilities implementing comprehensive hero support programs. Steele's testimony supported legislative requirements. Military heroes earned housing security through service that civilian comfort depends upon through ongoing protection requiring federal commitment. Federal legislation faced opposition, while some politicians claimed reform would create entitlement culture despite evidence showing hero support improved rather than harmed military recruitment. Grassroots organizing provided veteran pressure while military families contacted representatives whose votes were needed for comprehensive protection from housing insecurity. Congressional passage of Samuel Hayes' Heroes Housing Act required immediate shelter for all Medal of Honor recipients, while penalties increased for bureaucratic delays affecting decorated veterans. This law ensures America's greatest heroes never face homelessness, while grateful nation provides security they've earned through valor, President announced while signing ceremony honored Samuel's advocacy. Supreme Court citation of Samuel's case in veteran rights ruling established permanent precedent protecting decorated veterans from institutional neglect that bureaucratic failures couldn't excuse. Medal of Honor recipients deserve presumption of support that bureaucratic delays cannot override through administrative convenience. Unanimous court decision declared. Samuel's foundation influenced policy affecting 400-plus Medal of Honor recipients, while his experience had become standard curriculum for VA training about hero support. International attention focused on American veteran care, while Samuel's advocacy had inspired similar movements in countries addressing military family support requiring global cooperation. 1 year later, Samuel's permanent housing overlooked Caroline's grave while daily visits continued with dignity. That community support had restored through recognition of service requiring ongoing gratitude. Judge Whitaker's courthouse displayed permanent Samuel Hayes tribute, while judicial courage had inspired proper respect for military sacrifice that legal system should honor. Steele's Iron Brotherhood escorted Samuel to Medal of Honor ceremonies, while their advocacy had earned recognition that motorcycle reputation hadn't previously generated. Rebecca's family care had enabled Samuel's recovery, while relationships had provided healing that institutional support couldn't address through human connection. Samuel's mental health had stabilized through grief counseling, while PTSD treatment had addressed trauma that Caroline's death had exacerbated. Some battles are fought with weapons, others in courtrooms, but most important ones ensure heroes never face abandonment that grateful society should prevent. Samuel reflected. Federal oversight ensured continued compliance, while systematic monitoring addressed problems that individual homelessness had revealed, requiring comprehensive intervention rather than temporary sympathy. The Samuel Hayes Heroes Housing Foundation had influenced policy affecting our 200-plus Medal of Honor recipients, while federal legislation required immediate shelter that his homelessness had demonstrated as essential for military heroes. Judge Whitaker's courtroom recognition had established judicial precedent for honoring veteran service, while her courage had inspired systematic respect. Steele's Iron Brotherhood had coordinated $400,000 in veteran housing assistance, while their advocacy had earned recognition that motorcycle reputation hadn't previously generated. Samuel's family reunion had restored relationships, while Rebecca's care had provided support that grief counseling alone couldn't address. VA showed 95% improvement in Medal of Honor recipient services, while reform had prevented hero homelessness through systematic monitoring. Federal oversight ensured sustained compliance, while veteran rights had gained permanent protection through policy changes that individual homelessness had inspired through viral attention requiring ongoing commitment to military families whose service had earned perpetual gratitude rather than temporary sympathy. 3 years later, Samuel Hayes served on National Veteran Housing Commission, while his homelessness had influenced federal policy protecting Medal of Honor recipients from institutional neglect that bureaucratic failures could create through systematic oversight. Steele's Iron Brotherhood operated in 45 states, while their advocacy had created sustainable support networks for vulnerable veterans requiring community assistance. Rebecca's continuing family care had demonstrated healing power of human connection, while Samuel's recovery had inspired other veterans facing similar crises. They learned that some battles are fought with weapons, others in courtrooms. But the most important ones are fought when choosing recognition over indifference transforms individual homelessness into systematic change, protecting military heroes from those who would abandon rather than honor sacrifice that freedom requires through ongoing vigilance against institutional failures that threaten veteran welfare earned through blood and valor that grateful society must remember through actions rather than words alone. Some battles are fought with weapons, others in courtrooms. But the most important ones are fought when choosing recognition over indifference transforms individual homelessness into systematic change, protecting those who've already sacrificed everything for the freedom to live with dignity.